to the next edition of the DFS Down Under Show. Smatho 10 and Big Hef here from dailyfantasyrankings.com.au with another massive show for round 7 of the AFL. Hope you're ready for 5 days of footy, 5 days in a row. Hef, how you going tonight, mate?
I'm good. You smashed that intro, Smatho. What's going on?
Getting better. I'm just getting better. Repeat.
I see what else is smashing. Draftstars, back-to-back 100Ks. Wowee.
Wowee. I was actually trying to attempt to count up all the money in the prize pools on the sites today, and just I got lost. I actually got up to Saturday or Sunday. I'm like, this is a stupid load of money that's been given away. Well, not given away. You have to earn the money, but obviously it's good times for the AFL. It's great times, and what are you thinking what's going to happen this week in round 7? More neutral venues, more COVID crap coming up? What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, it's... I got sat back squarely on my behind last week with my call on the Hawks. And, my Sam Simpson call wasn't my best either, so I'm looking to bounce back this week. Big time.
Big time. Well, we're going to find ourselves with a couple of single game slates on Thursday, Friday and Monday. 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. So it's all there on dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. We'll be providing all the cheat sheets, the previews. Poor Jesse, I've lined him up. He's good to go for 5 previews this week, and then it's only the start. It's only the start for him. So make sure you get onto the site. Make sure also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plenty of content from us too over round 7, including our DraftKings show on Thursday and Friday night footy. So make sure you check that out. Now, Hef, as always, before we get stuck in the footy, we're doing Smatho's 2 thumbs up. And again this week, there's been some great nominations on DraftKings. Look, Fate Bender, Clangers, they're just winning lots of slates here. They've been going pretty well. Our American friend Jake Anderson, 4-4, he pulled through as well. And former number 2 DFR member JC, 2009 on DraftKings, are great nominations there, but unfortunately not for them this week. Then on Draftstars, we're getting a great trend here of our single bullet winners. You know, Jonathan Rogg, he was a single bullet. Mark Hendry Dello, he only had a couple of entries. He went to get the ticket on the Friday. He got that as well. Cali Boys on Saturday, but today's thumbs up for this edition goes to Sunday's Draftstars winner. His name is Fishcake, and geez, didn't he put a dominant performance there on Sunday? So we bring up the team here, Hef, to have a look here. He had first and second on the leaderboard, plus a couple of more top 10. So, geez, that's a lot of prize money. 14,000 I counted in just the top 10 alone. Let's have a look at his side. Pretty good in the end. I think the pieces that we talked about on the Daily Fantasy Rankings previews that you needed to look at, you just put them together and whoosh go.
Nice way to announce yourself, isn't it? Lazy 14,000 on a little Sunday afternoon slate. Interesting. He's gone the Bulldogs stack. Bulldogs got in the neck by your mob.
Mm-hmm.
You've been up and about, 50 points. McLean, Hunter, McRae, Liberatore, and English. So that's just something to keep in mind. You don't actually have to be winning games to be winning with a stack.
Tim English, our boy. How's he going?
He's going really well, English, isn't he? As soon as I said he wasn't there yet, he's there now, isn't he?
He's almost outside of Grundy and gone the rucks he must have going forward when you're playing on Draftstar slates.
Yeah, he's still keeping that high hair at the same time. He's doing a wonderful job.
Now, Fishcake, this is your first 2 thumbs up, so you make sure you watch the screen here as we get the guys doing their thumbs up here. And back to me, towards the 2 ears. There you go, 2 thumbs up for you, Fishcake. Well done. That was a good way to announce yourself to the DFS community here in Australia. Everyone's going to be gunning for you now, mate, so good luck going into the future. Now, let's move on to the 2 games that we're going to cover on the show, and we're going to start here on Thursday night. And look at this. Perth, Optus Stadium, 8 p.m. start, or 8:10 p.m. start for Geelong and Collingwood. Cats are currently around at $2. The Pies are $1.80. Spread's pretty small at 2.5, and the total is a very low 103.5, which means we must have some weather in the area. Now, Hef, I know you're a bit of a meteorologist at heart, considering you do follow some equine animals around a track, so you must look at the weather quite often. What is the weather here in Perth looking like at the moment?
I did grow up with a poster of Mike Pook on my wall when I was a young child. A lot of rain coming and storms. We've seen some ripper storms in Perth over the years. I do remember Nick Natanui kicking 3 against Hawthorn in torrential rain early in his career. So, I dare say that the storm will be coming. We have our moments when we're trying to work out these rainy games at the MCG. I reckon this one we can be pretty confident that we're going to be dealing with some wet stuff.
Now, we touched on earlier shows this year about wet weather footy in terms of fantasy. So do you want to remind the viewers quickly just what do you look for if the game is quite wet for fantasy?
We're looking at stoppages, so we're looking at ruckman, we're looking at tackles, we're looking at in and unders. We're not looking at the ones who are built like you, Smatho, waiting for the ball to get out to them on the outside.
That's the way. So make sure you keep an eye on the weather, and the good way to look at the weather is actually looking at the line total throughout the week. If that starts creeping up, then obviously the weather's getting better. But if it stays around the same, prepare for wet weather footy. Now, in terms of the contest, DraftKings have their contest out already. They have a $20,000 feature for a $11 entry. And then Draftstars, as we mentioned, they've just gone whoosh go with 100,000. They've bumped it up from 75 to 100,000 on the Thursday night for a $15 entry. The $10,000 mini is back as well, plus the 5 the micro. It's going great guns on Draftstars. Now, at the time of recording, as we always put a disclaimer, we don't have the teams out when we record on a Tuesday. So if they don't play and we tout them to the cows come home, well, next time, all right? But we know that Will Kelly has done his elbow after his first game, so he's going to be out. Jordan De Goey should be back after his COVID suspension. Mitch Duncan is probably out, hasn't been ruled out as yet, along with Quinton Narkle. And Jack Stephen, who was rested or managed last week, he should be an inclusion if either of those two don't get up. So, dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all of your research, and I was doing that earlier today for the show and had a quick peep at the logs for 2019 in terms of how these two teams went at Optus Stadium. I noticed that the Pies had 6 players who cracked the ton and the Cats had 0. Now, the Pies actually played the Eagles and the Cats actually played the Dockers, so I'm not sure you can take that as what you will, but it's there. You know, it is a high potential scoring ground outside of wet weather. But these teams actually haven't played since round 1 2019 as well. So keep that in mind as well.
I'll jump in there on the ground, Smatho.
Yeah, mate.
One thing to think about Optus Stadium, very similar circumference to MCG, which of course is Collingwood's home ground. Very wide ground, and in stark contrast to the Cats' home ground down there at what we lovingly call it the Tip, down at, I can't remember what they even call it, GMHBA Stadium these days. Cardinia Park,
Yes.
Traditionalist, very narrow ground. So if you're looking at some way to try and line these teams up on grounds, probably suits Collingwood a little bit, the shape of this ground.
Fair enough. All right, so let's break this down. And we're going to start with the Rucks as always. And there's a bit of a theme on this show the last few weeks. We talk about Brodie Grundy all the time. He's up against Darcy Fort and Asavo Radaglia, who did pretty okay last week against the Lions. It wasn't really a fantastic ruck scoring game from the Cats nor the Lions last week. So Grundy at his price, you got to jam him in, or should we look at Cats options?
Yeah, so like we said, wet weather. We've got to really be seriously considering a double ruck stack here, I think, Smatho. We've got the forward status there for Darcy Fort. I can't imagine Grundy's had back-to-back stinkers too often in the last few years. 17.7 is still really high. You're going to want at least 100 from him. No doubt about that. If you are trying to work out which one to play, obviously Radaglia scored very similarly to Fort last week. I think with Radaglia playing more as the key forward and fought more in the ruck, I think that's not really going to suit Radaglia if this rain does come. We look at last week, Fort had the 16 hit-outs, Radaglia had 3, so that gives you a bit of an idea in the spread in the ruck. So I lean to Fort over Radaglia on that basis. And just with the setup of the teams here, there's not too many obvious cheapies, which sort of leads me to playing Fort as well. There's another 9, nearly 10,000 to spend.
Well, it's 8,060. He's actually cheaper than Radaglia.
Well, yeah, and he's 9,700 cheaper than Grundy. So that's a lot of salary that you can use in other positions. And we're not going to be playing, Mason Cox is down to 6,000. I still can't play Mason Cox in these wet weather contests. So Grundy's the man. I assume he's going to bounce back. If he's going to bounce back to the level that he's going to outscore Fort by whatever he needs to, probably 50, 60 points. That's probably a big ask, but the double ruck stack is definitely in play.
I was going to say yes or no. Should I go the double ruck stack and just don't think about it?
Yeah, it's in play, and if I have to choose one ruckman, I'm going to go with Fort and give me a bit of money to spend on the rest of the team.
Now, the defence here. This is the most important decision that I reckon you need to make in this particular slate, because if you check out the points against tool on the DFR website, it shows quite a stark contrast between these two teams. Collingwood leak points to the back. They don't care if you have the ball down back. You can chip it around till the cows come home, whereas the Cats just don't give up points at all. So you look at Sicily last week. I think. Did you remember? Did you have a little word about Sicily gonna? Yep, I think
I threw out Sicily and Darcy Moore last week, actually.
All right, so you've got to find out for me then who in that role for Geelong does that, because there's no more
Tommy Stewart.
Yeah, no Tommy Stewart. Where is he? So is that a Mark O'Connor? Is that a Zach Tui? Is that Blixars? Is that Kolodashny? Buse, maybe.
Kolodashny.
Right, so
we don't have a Sicily. The thing about Sicily last week, it wasn't necessarily just a Collingwood thing. This is something that Sicily had done to Collingwood consistently. And now we're looking at wet weather. That's really going to take the intercept marking out of play. And the chipping around the back line is probably going to be less likely as well. But what you did say, this is the number one trend of the game. The one thing that stands out here is that Collingwood give up the points to backs. Geelong basically haven't given up points to anyone. So the obvious way to go here would be to play a couple of Geelong backs. I did notice there's Cam Guthrie listed as a mid defender, which I think that's a bit on and off. I don't think he's always a defender. But the thing about Guthrie, which we'll probably get to later, but he did have a lot of centre bounce work last week once Narkle and Duncan were out of commission. But if we're looking at wet weather, the chipping around the back line isn't necessarily something that happens a lot in wet weather games. It can be a little bit risky. It might be safer to go with Guthrie with that midfield role as opposed to playing two genuine backs. A guy like Mark O'Connor's going to bob up here because he did have that big 100 a couple of weeks ago. He's got back under 10,000 now. Geelong just have a lot of really cheap guys too in the back line that are cheap for a reason. They don't really score a lot of points. I think the wet weather probably suits a guy like Jed Buse, who's a really good tackler. I can't give a great push for anyone but Cam Guthrie, really.
Yeah, that's why I didn't have any names on my talking points here. I didn't have. I didn't have a guy. I was like, what about this guy? What about this guy? Like, it just the narrative against the data is just clashing. Like, look, you could look back towards the Tigers and the Swans game last week, right? Where if you had Jake Lloyd, you're thinking, oh crap, this is no good for him. But he did a lot of kick-ins, all right? That boosted his score. Then you look at Callum Mills, right, who scored 120, but he took a truckload of marks, just that intercepting mark from the quick kick. So if we're going to have rain when it kicks forward no matter what, who's sitting in the pocket taking these marks?
Well, Tui's been in really good form since Stewart went down, a couple of 70s. So he's a guy that is going to get involved in a bit of that sort of work. Blixarves is pretty strong, 8,000. We know Blixarves can have pretty good games. Usually when he has a good matchup, Blixarves, he sort of comes to the fore, so he's in play. Harry Taylor's another guy who can take a mark. Jack Henry's even a guy who can take a mark. I'm struggling to give you a push, apart from saying I'm probably going to play a lot of Geelong backlines,
Yeah.
unless I'm running with a Collingwood stack.
Sure. All right. Well, let's move on to the midfield then, and obviously more premium targets from the Pies and the Cats to choose from here. Treloar still outscoring Adams, so hence their prices have now swapped. So you now find Treloar as one of the most expensive players on the slate. Is it the same old for Pies, or the rough and tumble of midfield stoppages and not much going on suits the Cats a little bit better here?
Look, I don't have a lean either way to these two teams. We've talked about Adams and Treloar, so let's talk about it again. I think the wet brings Adams closer as a play compared to Treloar. Both went really well last week. So I think that they're both in play, which I don't often do because they tend to contrast each other. There's a few cheaper guys here that we sort of need to discuss. Rupert Wills is the obvious one when we're thinking wet weather footy. Loves a tackle and a really good game last week against Hawthorn. Maybe the problem for Wills is the return of DeGoey. The week before, when DeGoey was in the team, Wills had a very low time on ground and he only scored 39, which would be a disaster at that 10,000 price tag. And then with DeGoey out of the team last week, he sort of returned to what he does best. So it's a bit of a toss-up. Do you get scared about that role, or does the wet weather conditions sort of override that because he's perfectly placed for the wet? And your man, Braden Sire, we're hoping, is there any chance he can come in this week? 6,000, we'd love him in the team this week.
Well, if DeGoey comes in, that brings Kelly out. I don't know. Hopefully, but maybe if Callum Brown's out or one of the Browns, he has to get to come and go.
Yeah. In terms of Geelong, like Dangerfield, Selwood, they're two Bulls. Wet weather's probably going to suit them more than anything because, especially Danger, great player Danger, a bit of a hacker, but when it's tough, he's tough. So wet weather's just right up their alley, those two guys. Maybe not so much for Duncan. I wouldn't assume Duncan would be playing. Menegola has been in great form. We'll probably touch on him in the forwards. There's a few guys from Geelong we can play in the forwards here. But I think I want to be spending up in the mids here because these top-line midfielders, I think they're the sure things on the slate.
If you take out Narkle, who's probably not going to play, you find pretty much that Jack Stevens going to be the cheapest mid on the menu, and that's at 10,000. So
Jack Stevens going to like the wet. I think he's like most of them, Jack Stevens.
It's going to be tough. I reckon you have to save money to spend literally all your money on 4 premium midfielders, unless we get a shock team selection from the Pies or the Cats or something, replacing Duncan or Parfitt with someone that's never played. The guy that was the shock selection was obviously Mr. Simpson.
Mr. Simpson.
And now he's 11k. So
I didn't want to play him at 5k, so how am I going to play him at 11? We have to sort of mention that Narkle and Duncan both went down the first quarter, which opens up plenty of opportunity. Obviously, he took it tremendously well, Simpson. Like 100, this is in COVID times. It's just sort of unheard of for a guy to come in and just go away with 100. So, wow, 11k.
Yeah.
You could argue that I just can't play him 11k.
I mean, if you play Grundy, you might have to play him. All right, so,
I think 6, yeah.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the forwards. And if it's wet weather, it means that your output's going to be really tightened up here. I did write up about Tom Hawkins, and I thought, well, is this conditions for him? It probably could. I mean, if he is ever going to clonk a mark, it's him in the wet. But, geez, you're pretty much safe to ignore the talls such as Cox and whoever else talls down there. But Maybe our little Fijian friend, Bolson Vlagi, was it Bolson Vlagi? I don't know what his name is, but he's pretty much the cheapest guy down here I actually like. What do you think?
Yeah, he was really impressive. Bosena Valagi,
Bolson Vlagi, that's the one.
yeah, he was really good actually last week, and you wouldn't think he'd be too affected by wet conditions. He had really good hands, so I reckon that might help him. Um, Obviously, we've got Fort as the option here. Hawkins, look, wet weather turns me off, but a thing that I noticed about Hawkins is he wasn't just playing that full forward role. He was getting up the ground a little bit, and he did this a couple of years ago. He had a massive season, and they weren't playing him as just a stay-at-home full forward. He was sort of roaming up, leading up a bit more, and I wonder if they're sort of going down that path a bit now again. 11 and a half. Like, I much prefer to play Brennan Parfitt. He's the obvious guy here in wet weather. When it comes, he's like leading the comp. Is he still leading the comp in tackles? If he's not, he's pretty much close to it. So a little bit of a price drop after his game last week, which wasn't the end of the world when he came up with a 67, which, geez, if you got 67, 11, it's far from the end of the world. And the upside's definitely there for Parfitt. So he stands out as an obvious play. You can play Menegola here too. Degoe at 10, he's always sort of in play, and he's that bull that can sort of stand up in the wet. Jamie Ellett looks too expensive for me now at 10 when we've been playing him at 8. Don't think the wet suits a guy like Will Hoskin-Elliott, but I can see myself going pretty thin here around the likes of Fort and Parfitt. Stevenson's a guy who got up the ground a bit last week too. I even noticed him in the back line. But, I think Parfitt stands out and Fort. If you're going to play Grundy, I think you've almost got to play Fort just for the price savings.
All right, very good. All right, keep an eye on the DFR website for Jesse's preview. Also, our cheat sheets and points against tools. It's all there for us for that particular game. Let's move on to Friday night footy then. So we've got the Bombers versus the Bulldogs here. Currently, it's nearly a coin flip here, but the Bulldogs are just in front here. $1.85 for the Bulldogs, $9.95, 123.5 total with just a spread of a point. Draftstars back-to-back 100k contests. Good on them. Well done to Draftstars. DraftKings are TBA at the time of recording. So in team news, the Bombers are actually lost Con McKenna as well. He has a broken finger, so he's going to miss that. Shield, obviously, at the tribunal, got the 2-week whack, so he's going to be out. Hayden Crozier has served his suspension, so he's likely to be in for the Bulldogs, who are probably going to mix things up after losing to my boys on Sunday. So let's break down this particular game. Or do you want to have any thoughts before we move on, before we break it down?
Well, I'm scared because the Dogs have lost, and that just gives Bevo a chance to do whatever the hell he likes. So who knows what Bevo is going to do. At least when they were winning games, they were starting to settle, and we were sort of getting a bit of an idea of the structure, but they just got beat by 50 points by Carlton. That could go out the window this week, so I'm very nervous, Smatho.
Very nervous. All right. Now, these prices, they've kind of jumped around a little bit, especially on the Bulldog side. Obviously, you mentioned on earlier, they lost the game, but their fantasy points meant prices have gone up a little bit. So let's start with the Rucks, and I'm just saying Tim English and move on. Is that correct?
You are firmly on this wagon now, aren't you, Smatho?
Oh, I've hitched on. And shame on me for not playing him for weeks and weeks on end now.
Yeah, he's had a massive month, English. Wow, it could be as easy as saying play him and move on. One thing I will say, he's got to be getting really popular now, doesn't he? And at 14 and a half, we've got about a $3 and a bit $1,000 difference back to Phillips. The thing about Phillips is he's had 2 games against Grundy and then against Goldstein. 2 of the best tap ruckmen in the comp. We're not going to put English in that category in terms of tap ruckman.
No.
English is going to get his points around the ground. I can make a case for Phillips, especially with that contrarian angle. He had 20 28 hitouts against Goldstein. He didn't do much else around the ground, which is the worry. And English is probably going to give him a decent old run around, but his floor is going to be pretty all right. He's got to get 30 hitouts pretty easily, I would have thought, Phillips. English is the obvious play, but yeah, I wouldn't turn you off playing Phillips if you wanted to be a bit different.
Oh, that's pretty unconvincing argument to have. Like, I had a sign that said change my mind, and it just didn't work. Sorry.
You're going to play 100% English, and I'm not going to play quite that much English. I could see myself playing. And you talk about the prices being up too. It'll probably come back to how much you like the other cheapies if you have to give Phillips a bit of a go just to save a bit of money. But yeah, he just looks so good around the ground, English, doesn't he? It's unreal.
Yep. It's unreal. Takes some marks, chips on, in the chains, tackles. He's yeah. Get him in. Don't need me convincing. All right, let's move on to the defence. Now, there is some solid options here for the Dons, but they're all solidly priced. There's no real kind of standout for the Dons there. But I've got some trivia for you, Hef. And guess who top scored for the Bulldogs in defence last week?
Oh, is this where I pretend Yeah, you told me this before the show, Smatho. You sort of ruined it for me. I tried to guess Alex Keith because I knew it would be someone stupid. It wasn't him, but I won't spoil your thunder. Who was it?
It was Louis Butler with a little 50, I think 58 points. He actually top scored. He was at that little dirt cheap price. Like, end up beating Johannesson and who else? Caleb Daniel taking all the kick-ins, but no, he actually top scored for the Bulldogs in a dirty day for him. Let's be honest. So.
You've been bathing in that dirty day all week.
Yeah, it's only been a couple of days, so. Now, as I said, there's solid options here, but there's no real spectacular ones. Like, Ridley is great, but his price is 12.4. You know, it's that funny little price where, like, I'm not really going to get too much out of him, but he's not going to crap the bed. You know, Hurley and Redmond and, Johannesson and, Caleb Daniel, all that over 10K. We have to at least pick one of these guys. Who are you looking at?
You want a cheap guy?
Yeah.
I can't do BT any justice here, but Orazio Fantasia has gone to halfback.
Yes.
We know he's got a lot of ability. 64 against North Melbourne. We can play him at 7.5.
What about our little boy Butler at 7.7?
Well, there's your back line.
There's your back line.
Well, there you go. You can play English. We've got Butler and Fantasia in the back line. You don't even have to, tick over 15K. There's your cheap back line. In reality, I probably want to play Fantasia with another bomber, or I want to play Butler with another dog. But if you want to spend down, I think they're two pretty good options.
All right. There's my little signatory. All right. Let's move on to the midfield. So, obviously, no Shield now. So, who bumps up for him? That's my first question before I move on.
Yeah, that's we can. Well, Shield's basically not there on the weekend anyway. Only five. Well, we can. We can use a bit of that from the weekend. The obvious guy was Darcy Parish, who got a lot more run in the middle and scored a 72, and everyone's been crying out for Darcy Parish to get more midfield time. Draftstars haven't quite caught up with him yet.
No, they haven't. I'm scrolling
What are we
down.
looking at?
I'm scrolling down here. Where is he?
He's
10,680. 12 CBAs last week out of 18. So he's around the ball. And even with Shield was in there. So this is forward mid. Yeah, this is going to be probably the chalkiest player of the slate, I reckon.
Yeah, I think unless all your Team English teams take over, but I think you're right. He's the obvious guy to take over from Shield. Another guy actually who had a very bad start in his first game the week before. Hibberd, he only got Mitchell Hibberd. We're talking about here. He only got 20 odd against. That was against your boys, wasn't it?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, he had 66 in game 2, which you like my back the track up.
Back the track up.
Back the track up in the second game. And he would have rewarded. He he would have been sub 6K, I think, and came up there with 66. Plenty of the ball, tackles. He did it all. 7,100. Oh, he's going to be pretty popular, and with no shield there, he has been touted as an inside midfielder, so he's another guy who potentially gets even more of a look in there. So, geez, we're going to play Tim English really easily at this rate, Smatho.
What about Bulldogs options, though? You know, Jack
Bulldogs.
McRae 16-2 and Lockie Hunter's 15-2. So I don't think you can play both of them along with English, along with Parrish. You're starting to run out of money.
Here's a question for you. Yes. Who's going to Bontempelli?
That is a very good question. Would you think...
Anyone?
No. Maybe Zacharakis in a lockdown role? May get a bit of confidence now after his little forward line effort.
I've told you to stop drinking before the show. I don't think there's anyone going to Bontempelli. So straight away, he's on my radar. And he's the captain. They've just got flogged by Carlton. If there's ever a time for one of these massive Bontempelli performances, surely it's this week.
Yeah, it is this week.
Back against the wall. But yeah.
I was going to say, I've got Tom Liberatore's name here as well. 17 out of 26 CBAs last week too. So if you're ever looking for a little pay down option outside McRae or Hunter, 11,000 for Liberatore. What do you think?
I'd prefer him if he'd be under 10. He got 71 last week. Like, what's Liberatore's ceiling? I just don't see him getting more than 70. I could be wrong, but I don't really like it for Liberatore. I just don't think there's enough upside there. I think there's enough cheapies around that I don't think he's sort of going to be needed. Well, let's just go looking up the top end. McRae, 16,000. I think he's playable. I think Lockie Hunter's playable, coming off 100. I think McGrath's obviously playable at 14,000. With Shield not there, I think McRae will just spend the whole game in the middle. Bailey Smith is starting to get up there in price at 13.5, but like, what can you say? He's off a 94. He's as good a second-year player as there is in the comp, Bailey Smith. And, wow, how he fell to number 7 is just beyond me. Who would you have, Bailey Smith or Sam Walsh, Smatho? Don't be biased.
Sam Walsh.
All right, get out of here. He's a freak, Bailey Smith. He's an absolute ripper. Devon Smith, he's a guy that's, well, we're talking about him in the forwards, but there's plenty of options. Plenty of options.
I don't see any cheapies apart from, obviously, your man Mitchell Hibbard. Snelling. Now, Snelling is now available as a forward only. So let's just move on to the forwards. Yeah, forwards only. Yeah. 9,880. Last week he had an 82, which is pretty good in terms of that price. I also got to talk about Zacharakis. Like, everyone played him at the start of the year. Everyone got burnt and then watched him get back his form. Or was it just a bit of a one-off last week?
I couldn't play. Well, I'll tell you a story about my game last week. I put a few single game entries in for this Essendon North Melbourne game. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how good am I? I've played a lot of Will Snelling in my teams. And he had 82 at, what was he, 8,000?
Yep.
I am good. I like Will Snelling as a player, and he does have a ceiling at a low price, which I like. The only problem, he was only 7 or 9% or something. I thought, I am the man playing that. And then David Zaharakis, who was at about 6,000 and 40% owned, he had 80 himself, so it just blew me right out of the water. So I'm a bit dirty on Zaharakis. He's up to 9,000. Every game of this season, he's looked horrendous until last week. I'd prefer to avoid him. If he's going to be, like, everyone who's played Zaharakis, they're going to go back to him again. If he's going to be up there sort of around that 30-something% mark again, no, you can have Zaharakis. I'm not convinced yet.
No, he's burnt me a few times this year, and sure, he won people a lot of money last week, but I wouldn't be investing in him again.
He's not going back in the middle, though, is he? They got Smith, they got Langford, Parrish will be in there. I reckon Hibbert will be in there. there's no future in putting Zaharakis back in there, so he's got to be really prone still to having a shocking game. So I don't want too much Zaharakis.
All right, last player that we'll talk about tonight on the show is the guy who's jumped up quite a bit in salary now. His name is Vandermeer, Lafam Vandermeer. He's now at 10,450. You like this bloke, as he told me pre-show. Tell me why. Should I be at a very contrarian play here after his price bump?
Yeah, well, he's coming off 270s, so 10,000 is... It seems expensive, but on his form, he's quite reasonably priced. There's just something about him. He just looks like a classy player. I remember they played Sydney, and he was one out with Dane Rampy in the forward line and outmarked him, and Rampy fell over and looked stupid. And then you see him out on a flank using the ball well. He just looks like a player. Whether that translates to DFS, how well, I'm not sure. But obviously, a couple of 70s at 10,000, he's probably even going to pop on a few of these crunches as well. So I definitely wouldn't be saying not to play in Vandermeer. He seems like a strange play to play a guy like that at 10K, but maybe that's the strange play that's going to end up in your winning lineup.
If Bevo does strange things, and then if he's in around that, then yes, of course, you have to consider him. But you probably click on Parrish's name 9 times out of 10.
I think you can play them both.
You could play them both,
especially I think we've got enough cheaper plays there that we can fit English in. We can fit in, especially if you go down in the back line. I'm not sure what we've really got up the forward line, because even guys like Toby McLean and they're all, and Snelling, they're up in the $9,000 range. There's not really any really cheap guys that tickle my fancy apart from maybe Riley West in the 7,000s, who's a dead spitter of his old man, and his floor is like he just keeps knocking out those mid 40s, which isn't going to hurt you at 7.5, and one day he's going to pop off and have 60 something and be a really good play. But you're probably getting Parrish in your forward line as one, and yeah,
you're wavering. You're absolutely wavering. You look at you. You're
I'll end up playing Zaharakis at this rate.
That's why you're just going to take the easy road out. Just go, oh, geez.
I want to play Devon Smith, but he's 13,000, and he's in play as well. Smith and Langford. Langford's another guy who pops up through the middle as well.
This might cost you around 15, 20 entries now, the way things are going. With your indecision about finding players that you've just looked at and thinking, oh, I want to play.
Essendon do this to me every week. They got so many guys that they can run off half forward through the middle of the ground, and it's a matter of trying to pick which one it is. So, God, if everyone's going to be playing Darcy Parish this week, do we pray to Woosha that he throws him back in a forward pocket and jump on another guy instead?
We'll soon find out. All right, Hef. Well, let's wrap up the show here. It's another huge week of DFS action, so make sure you get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all your free content for AFL Daily Fantasy. We'll be back next week with more DFR Down Under goodness, and also we'll be back with our special Rotogrinders DraftKings shows breaking down these two particular games as well. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch them. Hef has been so decisive tonight. Thank you for joining me tonight on the show.
Hopefully, what are we doing? English versus Phillips?
Done.
No, I'm not that far along.
Thanks for joining on the show. Well done to everyone who's winning on Draftstars and DraftKings. We'll look forward to catching you on the next edition of the Down Under Show. See you next time.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Cheers.